Well, Mike Cohen here with you, Councillor Mike Cohen. Another great opportunity for a local authors discussion. Dr. Sara Ahronheim is an emergency physician at the Jewish General Hospital, trained at McGill University. And she's also a cote-saint-luc resident who's written a wonderful new book, Side by Side with Heroes, Stories of an Ambulance Medic in Israel. It relates to Magen David Adom, so it's very appropriate that Samuel Moyal, who's the regional director for Canadian Magen David Adom in Israel, is with us as well. Samuel, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Good to have you. So first off, I guess I'm going to just have Samuel kind of kick it off. Samuel, we're very excited because we're going to have a launch of Dr. Ahronheim's book. Why don't you tell everybody where and when it is?
Yes, we will. So we're very excited to be partnering up with the Cote-Saint-Luc Public Library on this event. And it's very fitting considering we have a few residents here of Cote-Saint-Luc, the wonderful Cote-Saint-Luc. And it's on February 13th. It's going to be starting at 6:30 p.m. Admission is free. Just people need to register. And it's very easy to do that. We'll give the information after. And it's very exciting because we're launching this wonderful book that Dr. Ahronheim wrote about her experience with Magen David Adom in Israel many years ago, and saving lives with them. And now today you're doing the exact same thing over here, or similar over here, and continuing that amazing work.
Exactly. Now, I read the book, Dr. Ahronheim, cover to cover. And interesting to learn that you graduated from Queen's University in Kingston, and before being accepted to the McGill Medical School, you went to this overseas volunteer program for Magen David Adom. Now, first of all, how long ago was that, and how did it all come about?
So I graduated university in 2001. And then in 2002, I decided to go to Israel to volunteer because when I was actually about 14 years old, I was at Camp Masad in the Laurentians, and a couple of the counselors who had been some of the very first people to go to do this program came for Shabbat, and they told us about this amazing thing at Magen David Adom in Israel where you could go and volunteer. And my mind was blown. I was so young and so impressionable, and immediately I knew I wanted to do it. So it was about 10 years later that I finally got the chance. And in fact, I met Yochai Porat, who was the program coordinator at Ernie and Ellie's. There was a dinner there to welcome new volunteers. And I met him there, and he was totally inspirational. And again, just cemented my will to go. And then so I went in June of 2002. I spent 2 months in Haifa. And then I loved it so much that I decided not to do anything else. And I went right back for another year in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very extended period. And so I guess, obviously, medical school, family, a lot of things came up. But how did it come to be that 20 years later, basically, you wrote a book? I mean, I noticed you kept really good notes. You kept like a diary. There were letters. I love the way the book's written in terms of letters that you've written back home about your experiences. Obviously, that made it easier.
It did. While I was in Israel, I started what I called my email diary. And it was before there was such a thing as blogs and social media in 2002. So I sent emails back to friends and family. I had about 150 people on this list. And people were just enthralled by what was going on over here. So I kept all that and I made it into a manuscript format that I knew one day I was going to make a book because people asked me to back then. But life got in the way. I came back. I went straight to medical school. And as people will tell you, med school is not something where you can do anything else but med school. So it's 4 years of med school, 5 years of emergency medicine residency, 2 children, a dog, and finally 8 years into becoming an attending physician, I had time. I had COVID, and I sat on my back deck and I edited this book and I put it together. It took me 9 months, but I finally put it out there.
So 9 months, it was another baby you had, the book.
It was my 4th or 5th, if you count my husband and my dog.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Samuel, you must be very pleased to see a book written by a local resident from the Montreal Jewish community about this experience. It's great exposure for Magen David Adom, and it will open up a lot of eyes, I think.
I really believe that it will, and it's just so amazing because on so many facets. First of all, that connection of that local connection with Cote-Saint-Luc with all of us already makes it so, homey to be working on this all together and to be promoting this to people that we know, friends and family, to be promoting Magen David Adom and the work that they do, to be promoting the volunteer program that we want more students to be going on this program. So in so many ways, this is really just an amazing thing to be doing and to be promoting.
Now, Dr. Ahronheim, it read kind of like a suspense novel, kind of like an episode of Fauda in some cases. You were in a lot of dangerous situations as a medic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I called it Side by Side with Heroes, because the people at Magen David Adom are like no one else I've maybe ever met. Even though I've worked with paramedics here and I've seen the system here, in Israel, it's different. I mean, people put themselves in harm's way every day. You go to suicide bombings and you go in there with a flak vest, hoping there's not going to be a second bomb. You go to scenes of shootings, you go into the villages, the West Bank, places that are very, very dangerous. And they do so. I did so because we wanted to help, and they do it every day.
And I noticed in one part of the book that you were going to East Jerusalem and you had little children throwing rocks at you. Your life was in danger from little children who hate anyone who's not Palestinian. And yet you had to go in, and I believe the patient was not a Jewish patient, correct?
Yeah, she was a teacher at a local school. And we went in there, and immediately there was just all the children outside trying to throw rocks at the ambulance and saying awful things in Arabic to us. And it was the first time that I really felt that kind of hatred for, no reason other than being Jewish. And I ended up having to leave the scene afterwards with the teacher. She was in one of our chairs. We were pushing her, and the ambulance medics sort of surrounded me in a little circle with their guns actually out of the holsters till we got back into the truck. And the Livui, the army truck, followed us back out. It was a very unsettling experience.
Samuel, for someone who's watching this video, why don't you tell them a little bit more about what is Magen David Adom? What do they do?
So Magen David Adom is Israel's national EMS, blood services, and disaster relief organization. So aside from being the primary and officially recognized EMS service in Israel, it's also the largest volunteer-driven organization in Israel. It has 30,000 volunteers and less than 2,500 staff. So it's really pushed by people who really give their time to be able to do that work, that amazing work. And MDA recently inaugurated a national blood center, which was a massive, massive project that was pushed forward by a lot of the friend societies around the world. And it provides all those services to Israel, to the people of Israel, but does not receive major funding from the government of Israel, unlike the Israel Defense Forces or other organizations that are funded by the government. So that's why they need friend societies like us, like Canadian Magen David Adom, that go out and raise millions of dollars every year to be able to fund that kind of medical equipment.
That being said, Dr. Ahronheim, one of the things I appreciated in the book was when you walked around Israel wearing your Magen David Adom insignia, wherever you went, you talk about a true sign of real respect that you got from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just because I always loved wearing it around because it signified that I was there to help and I could provide assistance. And it just felt like family. People would really treat you so nicely, the bus drivers, the shopkeepers, etc., because they know that most of the people at MADA are volunteers.
Yes, exactly. Now, the people you met, you talk about some very special people that 20 years later, you still remember very, very well, very, very well.
Yeah, actually, I'm still in touch with many of them.
Really?
They're really close friends of mine. Yeah, we haven't seen each other in almost 15 years, but they feel like my best friends. And some of those are the ambulance drivers and medics that I worked with, as well as the teachers of the course that I took as a volunteer back in 2002 in June are still some of my closest friends.
Yeah.
And even one of the patients that we rescued from an explosion, we keep in touch, and he sends me pictures of his children, and it's amazing.
I've been aware of the excellent work that Canadian Magen David Adom has been doing for decades. I've been writing about them in the newspaper. And of course, Samuel, I work very closely with you and National Executive Director Sydney Ben-Israel, who's also a city councillor, and the amazing activities you do. But one of the symbols is the ambulances that Dr. Ahronheim was in. Many of these ambulances are built here in Quebec, and they're donated from Quebecers. That's a big part of your mandate, isn't it, Samuel?
It's a big thing, and it's a big thing when we're going out and fundraising as well, because obviously, you know, a big part of our donations come from the Jewish community, and because of their connection to Israel and their connection to Magen David Adom, but also we get significant donations from other religious groups and other communities, and also when we can show that these ambulances are being manufactured by a company that's right here in Belleuil, just 40 minutes out from Montreal. That's a really big thing also for the Canadian economy, and also to be able to show that we're supporting something that's very close to us.
For sure. Dr. Ahronheim, a lot of ethical stuff discussed in the book, and one interesting one fascinating one was when you had to transport a terrorist, someone who was almost killed because he was trying to kill innocent Israelis, and that dilemma that you have to ask yourself, do I treat a terrorist? Which of course you do. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that ethical dilemma was very important during my time there, because it came up in my mind even from the very beginning. Like, what if this situation arose? Would I feel comfortable treating somebody who was trying to kill the people that I was there to help? And I knew from the start that, of course, I would. Of course, I would treat this person. In medicine, we treat any injured individual. And that day, we were actually asked, like, this never happens, but they asked us, our crew, would you be okay to transport this individual from the hospital to a military hospital, knowing that he's a terrorist? And we actually had to sit down. There were 4 of us in the crew, 3 of us actually Canadian overseas volunteers, and 1 driver. And we talked about it, and we agreed that we would do it. And we went to the hospital. We picked him up with 2 soldiers who rode with us in the back. And in fact, this individual was just like you and me. As a young man, he was pleasant and normal and suffering from an injury, and it felt like transporting any other human. And so it was tough, and we talked about it before and after. We spoke about it outside the walls of the military prison before we were able to get back in our ambulance. But it really struck a chord, and I was even asked the same question in my medical school interview. And I actually was able to answer the question that, of course, you treat everybody no matter who they are.
Interesting. Now, we always hear about, a lot of bad media coverage about Israel, a lot of negative, one-sided. But Samuel, for instance, Magen David Adom is not an ambulance just for Jews. It's for anyone who needs an ambulance, correct?
Absolutely. As the national EMS service in Israel, not only does it provide those services to every single person in Israel, not only citizens, but also tourists and everybody that comes every year, but also the people that volunteer and that work at Magen David Adom are Jews and Christian and Druze and Muslims and so many. It's such a colorful place to be and to work, and there was even a famous picture that went viral a couple of years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but of two MDA first responders that were working in ambulance on an ambulance shift together, and it was time to pray, and one of them was praying with his tefillin, a Jewish EMT, and one of them was bowing on the floor because he's Muslim, and that picture just showed unity, and it showed peace in a place that sometimes it's very hard to see.
Yeah, well said. So Dr. Ahronheim, how did this inspire you, this experience, to become a doctor? I mean, you were already going to go to medical school, but did it give you an extra push?
It did, yeah. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a doctor from a young age, but when I went and I worked on an ambulance, and I really was able to get into people's homes and see where people were coming from and the injuries and illnesses they were suffering from, and just be able to sit in the back of an ambulance truck, hold someone's hand and tell them they were going to be okay, it really cemented that passion. It really drove me to emergency medicine in particular. I was always sort of like up and down, am I going to do pediatrics or emergency medicine? And it just cemented that I was good in those situations. I was helpful. This is what I was meant to do.
Yeah. And did you decide, I know, being a parent many years ago when I had my daughter was very little, we went to the Hillside Medical Clinic where your mom and dad presided along with our doctor, Dr. Kimia, and a great clinic. And you had two parents who you grew up around the table. So how did that impact your decision to want to become a doctor?
Yeah, we spoke medicine from the time I was tiny, so I knew all about it and the way that it worked. And you know what I really learned from my parents as a child was altruism and self-sacrifice as a doctor. So knowing that you go into medicine and first response, not just because you want to make a buck and you want to have a career, but because you're really dedicated to helping other people. And I saw my parents sacrificing so much of themselves and their time and their family time to do the job that they did. And that really inspired me as well. They're incredible. They're still working in their 70s, 80s. So,
Are they still working?
well, my mom just retired, but my dad is, and he's 82.
Okay, fantastic. So you're at the Jewish General Hospital in the emergency room. We've been reading, especially since COVID, about what it's like. What's it like to be working in the emergency room in this day and age at the Jewish General Hospital?
This is a great question. So it's hard. I'm not going to lie, it's tough. During COVID, it was actually very calm. And it was actually very motivating to me as a doctor to be able to treat people when they were so frightened to come into the hospital, just to see them come in and be able to reassure them and treat them. And now we're flooded. I mean, the place is very, very busy, and we work our hardest every day to provide the services that we can. And we love it, and we do it because we love it, but it's hard.
I've been there twice since, I believe, 2018, both for kidney stones. One of the most painful experiences of my life. I'm drinking lots of water, but I'm afraid, I pray to God that I won't be back to see you, but it may happen. So I do know I was treated well then, but I hope if I have a kidney stone, it waits until the capacity diminishes a little bit, because you don't want to be sitting in the waiting room with kidney stones, because that's a pain. And by the way, is that a common occurrence of people coming into the emergency room for kidney stones?
You know what, it really is. And luckily we have a triage system. So when you're in severe pain, agony, we bring you in much quicker. We don't leave you sitting out there in agony.
Yes.
Whether or not the doctor can get there that quickly is another question, but we really do our best.
Yeah. I'm telling you, without the Jewish General Hospital's emergency room, I don't know what I would have done, because they really settled me down. The first one was bad. It was 3 weeks. And the second one, the stone passed in a day. I was lucky. But the people don't need to hear about my kidney stones, but it could be another book to write about. That's for sure. So my last question for you, then one last one for Samuel are there other books planned by you in the future?
There are. So this was actually my first in a series. So Side by Side with Heroes is almost like a prequel. And then the next book, I've actually just finished the first draft, is the stories of medical school. And from there, I move on to the emergency medicine residency, and finally a book about what it's like working as an attending emergency physician in one of the busiest hospitals in Canada. So like the first, these have all already been written, and I'm just compiling and editing them. They're a similar format, in that email and diary format, telling the stories of what I went through, what my patients go through, what my colleagues go through, and they're extremely interesting. So I look forward to getting them out there.
That's amazing. And I think at the Cote-saint-Luc Public Library, but to speak to Janine West, we're going to have to create a Dr. Sara Ahronheim shelf at this point. But I do know we're going to get copies of the book that people will be able to take out. Before I get Samuel to beautiful, where can people get the book, Dr. Ahronheim? Because obviously there's probably going to be a waiting list at the library. Where else can they get it?
So first of all, at the book signing on the 13th, I'm going to have many copies. So if anybody wants to get one there, feel free. You can also purchase them on Amazon. They're also for sale at a couple of local bookstores. One is KidLink on Monkland. One is Bonder in Montreal West.
Great.
So they're all around.
All right, terrific. So Samuel, what's the format going to be for the book launch at 6:30 on Monday, February 13th? Of course, at 8 p.m. City Council will meet, and we will recognize Dr. Ahronheim on our live stream at the beginning of the meeting. But don't worry, we do it at the beginning of the meeting, so you don't have to stay there while we pass all of our resolutions. Samuel, what's the format? What do you plan? What do you have planned?
So starting at 6:30, we're gonna have some food, some refreshments. It's gonna be a nice time. And Dr. Ahronheim is gonna be speaking about her experience writing the book. She's gonna speak from her heart, whatever she wants to speak about, and she'll have some copies over there. She'll be able to sign them for people that want to buy the book. And then, like you said, we'll have more of a ceremony after that. For information about the event and to register, it's very simple. It's cmdai.org/launch. That's cmdai.org/launch.
Okay, that's terrific. And I hope your parents are going to be there, Dr. Ahronheim.
I hope so. It's my father's birthday, so.
Oh, well, you know what, Samuel, let's make sure we have a cake with a candle for Dr. Ahronheim Senior there.
Chocolate or vanilla?
And see if he could bring back some of the other doctors from the clinic so I could see them again for the first time in many years.
That would be great.
All right. Okay, well, good luck. It was great speaking to you, and we will see you on the 13th. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so
very much, Mike.
Great having Dr. Ahronheim and Samuel Moyel, who's not a doctor, but he plays one on TV. Bye-bye for now.